just a very brief introductory talk. Well, the first answer, the first question, right, is what is belief revision? And I have this short answer here from Fermé and Hansson, that belief revision is a research area in formal philosophy that makes use of logic to produce models of how human and artificial agents change their beliefs in response to new information. So the properties of these models then are investigated in order to improve our understanding what it means to change one's belief, what it means to belief dynamics, with a particular emphasis on what it means to change one's belief in a rational way. For now, let's just consider a very intuitive notion of rationality, and then we go back to this point later. In order to motivate it, let's consider the following example. Suppose that a mobile robot has a map of the environment where it's supposed to move. On the map, there's nothing in front of it, so it should be able to move straight. But then its sensors indicate the presence of big object in front of the robot. Should it doubt its sensors and continue trying to move straight, or should it believe its sensors and doubt the map? Well, the fact is that in order to reason about the real world, intelligent systems like the autonomous robot in that example must have ways of dealing with incomplete and inconsistent information. These issues are addressed, for instance, in non-monotonic reasoning, database updates through maintaining systems, just to name a few areas. In order to see the relations with non-monotonic reasoning, I choose this example that you can see better this relation, in this general form. Suppose that a database contains the following information. Our European swans are white. The bird caught in the trap is a swan. The bird caught in the trap comes from Sweden, and Sweden is part of Europe. From the set of propositions, it can be deduced that the bird in the trap is white, right? But then suppose that I see the trap and see that the bird there is black. So if we want to consistently accommodate that new information that the bird in the trap is black, how should we behave? Should we keep the old data, ignoring the new information, or should we add the new information to the database, removing some of the beliefs contained in the original database? In this case, yes?
Maybe we should forbid trapping swans.
Tracking forms?
We should forbid to trap a swan.
Sure, of course, we should. Yeah, that's an answer. Well, in this case, should all the lists be retracted, or just some of them, including do not trap swan, right? Well, I think that most of you will agree with that if you really want to consistently accommodate the information that the bird is black, it doesn't seem rational to retract the fact that Sweden is part of Europe, instead of, for instance, retract the fact that all European swans are white. So it seems that there are some kind of astrological factors when we choose what to believe, or better, when we choose what to retract in this case. For instance, if we wish to preserve consistency, then some subset of the original database in the first example must be discarded, or even the new information or part of it has to be rejected. Any of these options, either individually or combined, allows us to solve the problem about the incompatibility among the original beliefs and the new information. So it's possible to define then an operation that takes a set and a sentence and then combine them into a new consistent set, but taking at least two basic notions, as I said before, consistency and a kind of a preference relation, or a kind of a choice among the possible ways of performing the change. For instance, a preference relation among the beliefs held by the agents. It can be said that in the origin of the area, philosophically speaking, from philosophy, it can be said that four authors had a big influence in the beginnings of this area. Well, the first author, Jürgen von Wright, who laid the foundations of logic of beliefs. It was considerably extended and studied by Jakob Hintika, who is considered as the founder of Formal Epistemology and game semantic for logic. The The third scholar is William Harper, who advanced this model to accommodate rational conceptual change. And finally, Isaac Levi, who provided much of the basic framework of belief change. I will not go deep into these formalisms, but it's just an introductory talk, so we can find them in the references. But arguably the most influential work on the area is the so-called Asian model, advanced by Hansson, Garapa, and Martinson in the paper, mostly in the paper Ontological Theory Change, Partial Contraction, and Revision Functions. Again, I will not go deep into the detail, formal details, but we can tackle a little bit of this formal construction. In this model, the state of an agent is represented by a belief set kappa, or also called theory, since which is a set of proposition of at least propositional language, which is closed under logical constants. That's why I can call it a theory. Very little is talked about the underlying logic. I mean, it's very generally defined, only that it satisfies basic target's properties, namely inclusion, idempotence, monotonicity, superclassicality, and deduction and compactness. Thus, it's possible to say that it is at least the classical propositional logic. Well, there are three distinct possible epistemic attitudes of an agent in that model. Is acceptance, namely when a proposition belongs to the set representing the belief state. Rejection, when the negation of a sentence belongs to the set representing the belief state. And underdetermination, when neither sentence nor its negation belongs to the set representing the belief state. Then, given these epistemic attitudes, we can define three distinct operators or operations. Expansion, that when a new information is strictly just added to the set of beliefs. A revision, when we add the new information, but then considering consistency, so we consistently expand our belief set, probably contracting or rejecting some old beliefs. And of course, contraction, when it occurs when an information is removed from the set of beliefs of an agent. So we have these six possible changes, namely from acceptance to undeterminedness, from accepted to rejected, and so on and so on. And these six possible changes entailed, given them, we have these three distinct operations, namely expansion, contraction, and revision. Again, I love saying I'll not go deep into the formal details of these operations because that's not the focus here. What I want to focus, what I want for you to pay more attention is that these constructions presuppose some rationality criteria underlying these constructions. For instance, consistency, which states that if possible, the new epistemic state should always be consistent. Preference relation, or a kind of relation, preference, namely the beliefs that are considered more important or more entrenched should be kept in favor of those less important ones. Minimal change, namely the new epistemic state should retain as much as possible of the previous state, and primacy of the new information, namely the new information should always be accepted in the belief set. Well, but should that be always these rationality criteria? Take for instance consistency. We consider, for instance, that's one of my works, my main work, my PhD thesis, when we consider per consistent underlying logic, what should we do? Since we have this minimality or minimal change, which states that we must always retain as much as possible information of the previous state. But since we can formally accept contradictions, shouldn't retraction, just to accommodate an information, be considered as hurting the minimality? So if that's the case, what exactly do we mean by consistency? Is it non-triviality? Is it non-contradictoriness? And by non-contradictoriness, what do we think about that? Is it between two sentences, or just coherency function? So the fact is that when we take distinct logics, when we take distinct underlying logics, we can change this rationality principle, or at least we can change the priority among them. Another example is privacy of the information. Of course, there are situations that the information should not be strictly added to the new belief state. There are situations when we want to take this new information and then put in the same scrutiny of the old ones. So respecting the preference. So we're not saying that the new information has priority over the old ones. So all of these are distinct models, specialized models, distinct to AGM. So we can all have, I'm just using the AGM to motivate the discussions. But then we come back to the question, so what exactly does it mean rationality? What I mean by rationality? The fact is that rationality has several distinct specialized meanings in philosophy, economics, psychology, artificial intelligence, and several other areas. Even when we want to take one specific epistemic meaning regarding the dynamics of belief, there is no consensus about dealing with such concept probabilistically, decision theoretically, logically, or computationally. So in this workshop, we have the opportunity to check some of these distinct approaches to rationality and how it affects the dynamics of the systems considered. For instance, Alexander will talk about public announcements using intuitionistic logic, or maybe the other way around, but that's it. Mateus will give this bridge concept, right? We'll bridge belief and credence and see what's the relation among them, and what we must consider as rationality in this case, I think. And finally, Yorgos, our keynote speaker, will talk about belief revision and argumentation approach to support common sense reasoning. Since common sense reasoning, of course, will not obey all those criteria before. So I think that's the name of the workshop should be this, the rationality, dynamics of rationality, or rationality of dynamics, and so on. But that's it. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed the workshop.